Here we go with Jen.
Thank you all. Thank you all, first of all, for existing, because it's organizations like this that are going to flip the state legislature, which is where we need to be. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for that introduction, and I'm very happy to be back in Gardner. So I'm Jen Mesker. I'm running for the 42nd District State Senate because I'm sick and tired of waiting for our state senator to do his job. We need affordable health care for all. We need a strong public education system that's fairly funded. We need a clean energy economy that creates good jobs. And we need a government that represents us. And it doesn't represent us right now. I understand the challenges that our rural communities face. And I believe I have the experience to address them. You all can make that decision for yourselves. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, who I am. I'm originally from Queens. When I was young, when I was in kindergarten, my dad was laid off, and we went from living a middle-class life to relying on extended family and food stamps. And I remember that feeling of being really embarrassed as a kid with my other kids about that situation. But I worked really hard in school, and I took full advantage of a really good public education system. And I went on to college with a full financial aid package. And having access to those resources changed the course of my life and inspired me to go on and get my PhD in political science and work to make sure that everyone has a chance to live with dignity and have the same opportunities that I have. For the last 17 years, I've been living in Rosendale, just down the road a piece, with my husband John, where we've been raising our 3 sons. For over 10 of those years, I have been involved in local government. I chaired the town's environmental commission for many years, served as deputy town supervisor, and I'm currently in my 2nd term on the town council. I have stayed up late nights dealing with challenges like how to deal with a 20% increase in healthcare costs for our employees, paying them a decent wage, and keeping our community's taxes affordable. And these are the kinds of challenges that all of our communities face, including this one, I'm sure, and every other. I also co-founded and direct an organization called Citizens for Local Power, a nonprofit organization. We have worked to reduce utility costs, to help communities save energy and save money. And I've organized dozens of town and city councils across the political spectrum in the fight against the Pilgrim pipelines, which would have carried millions of gallons of fracked crude oil through our communities from Albany down to Rockland County. We've kept that project at bay for 3 years and hopefully forever. Fingers crossed. I've also, over the years, spent a lot of time in Albany at the Public Service Commission fighting for energy reform and against utility rate hikes and high fixed charges. New York State's investor-owned utilities have among the highest fixed customer charges in the country. The thing is, there's only so much we can do without the backing of the state legislature. Fully funded schools, affordable health care for all, a clean energy economy will be out of reach unless our state senators are willing to pass legislation that serves working families. But year after year, they serve the wealthy and the well-connected instead of all of us. Right now, we are really at a critical juncture, and state government has a more important role to play now than ever before, or at least since the U.S. Constitutional Convention. The Trump administration has launched a full-blown assault on the health and well-being of the American people, attacking public schools, rolling back protections of our water and our air, giving carte blanche to the fossil fuel industry, chipping away the Affordable Care Act that has brought coverage to millions of people for the first time. So now, more than ever before, state governments have to step up and protect the public good and protect the democratic values that we share and have been really under assault. So what is the holdup in New York State? It's the Republican-held Senate. Just to give you a little flavor for our state senator, he has gone on record opposing the Child Victims Act, which would bring justice to child victims of sexual abuse. Just a couple of weeks ago, he was in the minority, voting against closing a loophole to keep firearms out of the hands of domestic abusers. So he chose to side with the NRA rather than on the side of saving lives. He and the rest of the entrenched Republican majority have essentially blocked almost every good piece of legislation that would serve working families. In the area of healthcare, we were one vote away from passage of the New York Health Act, which would have created a single-payer system in New York. Education, the way we fund schools is totally broken here. It doesn't serve our kids whose schools aren't getting the resources that they need, and it hurts seniors and working families who can't afford to pay their taxes. Schools can't fix this, local governments can't fix this, only the state legislature can fix this. On energy, the fossil fuel infrastructure projects just keep coming and keep coming, even though the state is ostensibly committed to shifting to clean energy. This is an enormous area of job growth potentially for New York State. The clean energy sector is one of the fastest growing in the country, not just in renewable energy and the related industries, but in energy efficiency, which is very, very labor intensive, unlike the fossil fuel industry, which is just capital intensive and doesn't create a lot of good jobs. So there's a lot of potential there, but we need the legislature to be committed to that shift to a clean energy economy. And then sort of connected to all of these issues is the corruption that's endemic in Albany, in both its illegal and legal forms. In its legal forms, it's our campaign finance system, which just, there's just a river of corporate funds flowing into Albany, preventing this legislation, propping up these incumbents and preventing the legislation we need. So to get progress on all of those other issues, we really have to address that and have get campaign finance reform, get elections reform. Now the solutions are all there, but the Republican majority benefits from the current system. So they don't let the legislation get to the floor for a vote, and they're not going to. Why should they? They're getting huge amounts of money through the current system. So the only solution is to replace them with people who will get the job done. This seat is totally winnable. There are 10,000 more Democrats than there are Republicans in this district. This district is a funny district, as all state Senate districts are. It's part of Ulster, all of Sullivan, a part of Delaware, and a part of Orange County. There's a visual. Our state senators made a career out of accepting money from corporations and polluters and just giving our communities handouts. So this has to stop. He hasn't meaningfully changed our lives and opportunities. So it's time for him to go. I am running this race with a lot of commitment and energy and enthusiasm. And I am so ready to tackle these challenges and get this legislation through. And I hope that you all will support me and be part of that process. It'll be a collective effort. We have a sign-up sheet for, you can be on the mailing list and sign up to volunteer, which is always great. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Can you just re-highlight those things that you mentioned that Bonasek supported most recently? Because I think we were all kind of astounded when we were flabbergasted the other night, because they're huge and they're important issues. So
Sure.
just in case like that got past you, I just...
Right. So the Child Victims Act, it was hoped that there would be movement on that as part of the budget process, because all sorts of policy issues can and have been addressed as part of that process. There were organizations that were working really hard for that, but the Senate majority blocked it, and our senator was part of that blocking. The other was closing the loophole in existing law to keep firearms out of the hands of domestic abusers. There had been pre-existing law as part of the SAFE Act. And what this did is, first of all, include all firearms, so shotguns, all rifles, all guns. And it also expanded the kinds of crimes that could, it expanded it to include misdemeanor crimes and not just felony crimes. So it broadened the range of crimes for which this law would apply. So it was a very important law. And even the Republican majority leader, voted in favor of it. But not a single Republican senator in the Hudson Valley did. All four voted against it. So and it's unconscionable. There's nothing you can say to that. And then so many good pieces of legislation don't get to the floor at all. So they play this game, they don't have a voting record, right? They don't have a voting record on issues because they've never allowed things to come to a vote. But we know what they're doing. We know the legislation gets killed in committee. And that's what you really have to focus on. And this senator will, he'll say he supports things. He'll sponsor pieces of legislation. Last year he said, so he was seen as an instrumental vote the first time around. When the Women's Equality Act was first considered, and he wouldn't support it because of the provisions to codify Roe v. Wade. A subsequent version of it removed that provision and passed. Last year he came out and said that, oh yes, my daughter and wife have convinced me, that he supports a woman's right to choose, but the RHA has absolutely, he was quoted in the paper saying it will never pass. So you can say your four things, but if it passes, if it really has a legitimate, possibility of passage, would you go for it? And I think that's the real question. So, any other questions or questions?
I really appreciate you stepping up. I think that state level of government is so important right now. And I guess on that topic, what are your thoughts about the governorship and the upcoming governor race?
Well, I think this is already the democratic process has had results. And having competition and having a primary has had results. I think that you can attribute the deal with the IDC to go back into the democratic fold to the primary process. So, this is what keeps elected officials accountable. And it's an important part of our process, and it needs to occur. I have a primary, that's the way, I'll tell you the problem with the state primaries in New York State, and it's designed this way, intentionally by incumbents, is, it's completely, it's unaligned with the federal primary process. So we can't petition together. It's two completely separate petitioning processes, two separate primaries, and the state primaries aren't until September, 7 weeks before the general election, which, and of course people aren't really around in July and August, it's hard to get things done, So it leaves very little time to really run, hard against it for the general. So, from my perspective, I'm running this primary, like I'm running in this primary, like I'm running in a general election, and I'm running against Bonasek, and he is the one who we have to unseat. But that has to change, and it should be aligned, and the primary for state races should be early. It should be in July when the federal primaries are.
And Jen, just to ask you to elaborate, you talked a little bit about what has happened recently with the IDC. For people that are maybe not educated on that particular detail, could you elaborate a little bit?
Sure. It's the Independent Democratic Conference. I believe the history, there might be, you can correct me if I have this a little wrong, but we got a majority. In the state Senate. The Democrats had a majority, and then a group of them defected and formed the IDC, and it was very self-serving. Essentially, it was all about giving themselves more power, a seat at the table. It was really had nothing to do with principles, nothing to do with values, nothing to do with commitment. And they have basically allowed the Republicans to maintain control for, it's been for a number of years now, 8 years, time flies. But it's been, they're not real Democrats. I'm happy to see that they're being primaried. It's great that they've, that they've come back. And I have one, for me, the biggest bright spot is that Andrea Stewart Cousins is now the head of, at the helm in the Senate, and she's incredible. But I certainly don't trust it, and I don't trust that it's going to endure. So I'm happy to see these primaries.
I just had a question about taxes, mainly school taxes.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started teaching in the 70s, the state paid about 70% and the local district paid about 30%. And now it's flipping around the other way.
Right.
And that was done by a Democratic governor, basically, our current governor's father. I used to beg him not to cut our income tax anymore because it was killing our school taxes.
That's right.
It was going up geometrically every time you cut it over 1% here and 1% there. Is there a plan on trying to flip that back the other way?
Yeah, there was, the court actually ruled this foundation aid formula. There was a court ruling. In our Constitution, people have, in the New York State Constitution, a right to a good basic and sound basic education. Mm-hmm. And the court found that that right wasn't being upheld. And schools that need more resources should be given those resources. And there was a formula for making sure that they got the funding that they needed. And it was based on need, not on what you could raise in a through property taxes in a particular district. So under that formula, I believe there is a debt right now to schools that has not been paid of over $4 billion. There was, a proposal that this be paid, back over 3 years. But the budget only allotted, I think, over 600 million, which was not enough. It's not keeping pace with that promise. So I am fully in favor of fully funding the schools, paying that money to the school districts that are owed that money. And especially in this district, I mean, there are a number of schools that are owed a lot of money, especially in Sullivan County, where, there are much poorer school districts there, but also in Orange County, and in Ulster, City of Kingston. So, but I think that we also there needs to be, we need to be focused on going back to the old system and not relying so much on property taxes. That really has to be a much smaller portion of the overall funding, because people can't afford it. And, in our area, in rural areas, people, they own their property, but that's their wealth. I mean, they're working people, or they're retired people living on fixed incomes. They don't have a lot of money, and it's just not sustainable. And it's so unfair to kids. It's so unfair that, communities that don't have a lot of resources, those are the kids that need the good schools to break that cycle of poverty and to have opportunity to go on. And like every parent want to see their children do better than they did, and you don't have those opportunities if, your school can't offer AP courses because they can't afford it, or foreign languages or what have you. And, in my town, Rosendale, we've seen just how this issue of school funding can also just divide communities against each other when they should be all united around strong schools. And we have an incredible elementary school that was closed when my twins were in 2nd grade, and we fought to keep it open. But you had people living on fixed incomes that were like, close the school, I can't pay to support this school anymore. And it shouldn't be that way. It's our future, our state's economy future relies on a strong public education system. Any other?
I have a question. At a lobby day that I was a part of recently, I got the sense, talking to assembly people, that when they get something passed, they felt like they were kind of done with the issue, and my question is, what's the level of involvement and working together between the Assembly and the Senate? Because I'm to the point now where I don't get super excited when something passes the Assembly anymore. It's like, yeah, that's only the beginning.
Right. Well, I think that there's not much the Assembly can do, because, the Republicans are not, they just won't support the legislature that the Assembly is passing. So we need to have a majority in the Senate. And there are some really good Democratic senators in the Senate that are pushing for progressive legislation, but it's like Sisyphusium. It's impossible to get it through. So I think that if you did have a Democratic majority, you'd see a lot of cooperation and moving things forward.
Kind of going along with that, so I know like the Health Act has been in committee for a long time. How do you get those things out of committee, even if you have a Democratic majority?
Well, I think that there's a lot of support. If we go by how much support there was for the New York Health Act in the Assembly, if that's any indicator of what it would be like in a Democratic Senate, then it shouldn't be an issue.
Mhm.
I mean, I can't, I don't want to be too rosy about it. You have to ask, did every assembly member that signed on to that, hopefully they will support it when they're in the majority as well. But I'll certainly be working to make sure they do.
But how does it get out of committee? Like, what's
Well, the committee has to vote to pass, to move it. There's a whole process of committees, refer to one committee and another committee, but they just have to vote to let it, to allow the legislation to go the next step. What has been happening is they don't even vote on it. It just stops. They don't do anything with it. And that's been what's happening.
So if there were more Democrats on the committee?
Yes, we get more votes. So with the New York Health Act,
Okay.
we needed one more vote in the committee
Committee, okay.
to get it to the floor for a vote, where my understanding is it would have passed because it had some IDC support and had some other support, but it just didn't get out of committee. That's my understanding of it, at least.
I have two questions. One kind of follows along with what these folks have been saying, because there's one person who's been left out of the equation, and that's the governor. Because things may flow out, but if they don't have his support, things seem to stop. And I'm kind of tying that into, what are your feelings as to what recently happened with the Working Families Party? That's one. And two, Sullivan is a difficult county to work your way into, and they happen to like Mr. Bonsick up there for some strange reason. Just wondering how you're going to tackle that neck of the woods, because we're in our own bubble here, kind of.
Right.
We're all like, "Hey, Jen," but
Right.
then there's Orange County and
Right.
Sullivan County, and things start to change a little bit.
Yeah, so with regard to your first question, I think that once we do have, and I'm going to say once we have a Democratic majority, the governor hasn't had to worry about, really a lot of progressive legislation getting to him for signature. But he's going to be in a position, we hope, with the New York Health Act, where is he really going to veto that with all of the momentum, all of the support that there is for that? I can't imagine that, but if he did, or whoever it is, I think it would reflect extremely poorly on him. It would be a bad political decision. So I am optimistic that a strong legislature will be able to get good legislation passed. With regard to the lay of the land in the district, this district went for Obama twice, and then it went for Trump. So what that says to us is that the people in the district, and that includes Sullivan and Orange, want change, but they need candidates that they feel care about their issues and are speaking with them and listening to them. And I think that that's really what's key. And what I love about local government, and I've really enjoyed all the time that I've spent in local government a lot. And one of the things I love about it is that you are in the community you represent. I made this pledge years ago not to drive. So when I'm in town, I live in a walking distance from town, and I walk over, my kids beg me not to talk to people because I get into these hour-long conversations. It takes me 2 hours to walk into town, but I'm constantly interacting with the people that I represent. So I know what their concerns are, and I get emails all the time about all kinds of things from people. Really across the board on local issues, and that kind of contact is so great, and running for local elections is so wonderful because you're meeting people door to door And I really like that work. And it's a little different at the state level because the district is so huge. I mean, I just, it's almost 200,000 voters in the district. It would be very hard to go door to door to every one of those doors. And some of them are like many miles apart, especially up in Sullivan and Delaware. But I am going to knock on doors, and as many as I can. And it's also meeting people in the community. There's small towns, a lot of small towns. And people talk to one another. So, even if you can meet with, community members, and not all of them, but, maintain some regular contact with the communities in the district, I think that is a way for them to get to know you, so that when all of the awful, negative garbage starts coming out from my opponent down the road in the mail and on television and everywhere else, hopefully everyone will already have an understanding of who I am and what I stand for, and will know people that have talked with me, and that will make a difference.
Thank you.
I have just a quick question about the New York Care Act, like how you position to that. Like lately, now I see the slogan everywhere, Medicare for all, and I think that that's very deceiving in a way, and very confusing at this point when we're staying with this single payer. Because New York single payer is a model which is everything but Medicare for all. And so, how do you...
Well, it's a similar system to
Well, it's a
Medicare for
similar
all,
system.
in that you have choice of doctors, practitioners, and a centralized,
Yeah, but it's a
just-
very different concept. And I'm wondering how you position yourself, because yes, it's going to be presented and, it just needs one more person to bring it to the floor. But I'm very concerned that there are reasons why this is not,
why it hasn't been adopted.
right,
Right.
why it's not been passing. And we have another experience already, unfortunately in Vermont, and it looks like that those concerns were not addressed in what we're presenting now. And I think it is a great idea that we get, a state payer for health for everybody. I mean, the idea is great, but I've started to question the details, and especially these, new campaign with Katie Robbins taking over and calling it, New York State Healthcare Act / Medicare for all. Because my fear is that we could set up ourselves in a way that we're going to have another failure, and therefore we're going to just delay further making people convinced that that's the way to go.
Right, so I totally understand where you're coming from, and that's like legitimate points to raise. I think that New York is in a particularly unique position to implement this at the state level. I think there are economies of scale, and ultimately you need to have a federal solution, but we live in one of the wealthiest states, second wealthiest state in per capita in the country, and it's through, we can call them progressive premiums, that, but it's through taxation that you'll be funding this system. But we have the resources in New York State. That's
But that's not only the resources. There's no waiver. There's no
Medicare waiver.
federal waiver.
I'm just being mindful of time right now, because we have a lengthy agenda, and I think that this could be, I think our
Thank you
first.
so much. I really appreciate you giving me the time to speak tonight. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm running for state assembly. My name is Abe Uchatel. I live in Kingston with my wife, and that is the 103rd Assembly District. It's an interesting district. It's Kingston, Woodstock, Phoenicia. It goes across the river to Rhinebeck and Red Hook. It does not include Saugerties, but it does come down here through Rosendale, New Paltz, and Gardner, and out to Gladkill. And it highlights something very interesting. So the Senate and the Assembly have many differences, but they also have many things in common. And one of those things that they have in common is they have very gerrymandered districts. The Assembly is, as was mentioned earlier, is heavily in the control of the Democratic Party, and that's why we see a lot of legislation that we'd like to see passed go through the Assembly and not survive the light of day in the Senate. But it also means that a lot of the same problems that contribute to the lack of ethics reform that we would all like to see from Albany are also perpetuated by the near lifetime incumbency that exists in the state assembly. And that's one of the primary reasons that I'm involved in throwing my hat into the ring to run for state assembly. Our current assemblyman was first elected in 1992 when I was 4 years old. And I do believe that it's time for a change. I also believe that we have a lot of opportunity in this district that we can seize and we can really build upon. I run a business. I run a marketing agency that's based in Kingston that employs about 20 people, and these are good paying jobs that have benefits that are part of the modern economy, and I know from the tech community and from the energy that modern industry can bring to our area that we can see growth there and we can see opportunity there. And I don't see the attention on job creation and economic development that we require in order to seize that modern economy, because our economy is changing and it's my generation that is going to step up and seize that opportunity. And I believe that it involves us getting involved with politics. If anyone saw the U.S. Congress interview of Mark Zuckerberg last week, I think you know that we need people involved in politics that understand how the internet works. Well, while everyone is focused on Washington, and while Washington is a disaster right now, and I really believe that, and I want to move forward for all the work that they're doing around the congressional races, there is a huge role for this state to play, and I'm so excited that people like Jen Metziger are running for Senate. We have 3 Senate districts that cover the Assembly district that I'm running in, Jen Metziger running in the 42nd, we have Pat Strong who's running in the 46th, and then we have Karen Smythe who's running across the river in Dutchess County, and parts north. I think that's the 50th or 51st. 41st, yes, exactly. And so that's incredibly exciting, and I absolutely support those efforts. But I do believe that the Assembly has a role to play in all of this. And some of the issues that I'm focusing on in this election are around job creation, as I mentioned earlier, affordable housing, which is a really big deal. The topic of branding around issues was brought up before, and I think a lot of people have misconception about what affordable housing means. It's not just low-income housing. We're also talking about seniors that have lived in their homes for decades and can't afford to pay their taxes. And education is a huge issue, and early childhood education in particular. $1 invested in early childhood has the greatest return on investment of any dollar you can invest at any point. And I think these are the issues that we should see funding for. The way that the state assembly functions, the way that the state legislature functions, is a lot happens through the budget. So a lot of the projects that get funded are announced through the budget, and I think that the projects that we should be focusing on are the ones that our community needs. I think it's really important that there is some turnover in the assembly so that folks that are involved in the community, I'm on the board of 2 nonprofits that are heavily involved in the community, Family of Woodstock and the Kingston Land Trust. This is where we should be looking to in the community to see the need, and we have real needs in this community. We have an incredible opportunity around job creation. Those are the reasons that I'm running for assembly. And I also think, to speak to the incumbency and to speak to the status quo, we are not going to see things like election reform. We are not going to see things like ethics reform unless we get some new energy involved in running in these races. I think it's incredibly important. I do not believe that these should be lifetime appointments, and that's why I'm running. I would like to ask for your support in the primary, because it basically is a primary because of the way that the districts are gerrymandered to be heavily, the Assembly heavily blue, the Senate very red, and that's why it's so undemocratic that we have these September primaries and then a November election. But that's why I'm so focused on the primary here, because that is how we're going to see change in this assembly district. It's something I feel very strongly about, and it would be an honor to serve this community because I really think we have a great opportunity here. Thank you. We just did an event at Yard Owl earlier today, and the clipboard ended up in my wife's car, which is on the way back up to Kingston. So I'm going to pass around my notebook because this is a grassroots thing, and if you want to put your email address and phone number in my notebook, I would really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My name is Dan Lipson, as Glenn said. In addition to co-teaching a class twice with a science professor at the college who used to work with at NASA Goddard Space Institute with some of the world's finest climate scientists. I also was given the good fortune of working on a project, a state-funded Climate Smart grant, with a science professor in biology on Orange County. So hearing some of the conversation about your constituents when you get elected, that's some of what we're working on right now. And yeah, it's a little bit out of the bubble down there in Orange County compared to here. I just wanted to say that I'm very grateful to go after Jen Metzger, a fellow political science PhD and a comrade with Citizens for Local Power and so much other great leadership on this topic. So I'll be brief, just flag me if I'm somehow oblivious to time, but I've got 2 clocks in front of me. So I wanted to just give a brief overview about climate politics at the national level, and I'll throw in just a little teeny bit of my own pet peeve or my own spin, but otherwise I'll give more of a conventional American politics analysis of climate change policy and politics. My own spin is a little bit more on the ecological limits to growth, the concerns that at the root it's not just about evil corporations making a profit, although that is a big part of it, but it's also about us and the standard of living and the way of life that we are clinging on to. And I think that our clinging on to a certain demand for GDP growth is really at the core of the climate crisis, and I think it's also at the core of the rise of Trumpism and the rise of a lot of the right-wing populism. But I'll keep that part of it brief and focus more kind of on a conventional analysis of climate change. So in political science, we divide things up often. I'm often a little critical of how we chop things up, but public opinion, interest groups, lawmakers, economic growth, and economic policy, climate policy. So I'll just kind of give a quick run through of some of these topics, but I think I'll try to highlight some really fascinating, in some cases scary, in some cases inspiring trends in those topics. So public opinion, it is increasingly easy to label this as just a blue-red partisan battle. That Democrats overwhelmingly acknowledge the climate crisis and humans' role in contributing to it, whereas Republican voters deny it. But it's not so simple, although it's starting to get a little bit more simple in that way, sadly. So when I taught this class last, the statistic that I was sharing was that 49% of Republican voters acknowledge climate change and that humans play a major role in climate change. So just stop and think about that for a minute, because as I'll show you in a slide a little bit later, 46 out of the 54 senators voted for a symbolic resolution about 3 or 4 years ago to deny humans' role in climate change. So you've got 46 out of the what were then 54 Republican senators denying the fundamental science of climate change, where 49% of Republicans accept it. So there's a clear gap between what Republican voters believe or how split they are versus who they're electing. And who the people in elected office in the House and the Senate are just very far, they've drank the Kool-Aid of climate denial, at least in their actions. More on that in a little bit. But since you are kind of a group of advocates and activists, I think one of the most useful pieces of information on the public opinion side is the importance of knowing how to talk to people who may not already be in the choir you're preaching to. And there's some really fascinating, fabulous research, especially coming out of the Yale University Center on Climate Communications, or some title very similar to that. And I just wanted to give you a teeny flavor of it. The font here might be too small to read, but in effect, it's the headings to really pay attention to. So there's, the experts are dividing it into 6 groups of people's stances toward climate change. The alarmed, and that's us, the people who accept that this is a problem, accept that it's arguably the largest, the largest crisis facing humanity. Then there's the concerned, who are kind of one notch below, but very much on board. The cautious, tentative, progressive, but a bit worried about the economic consequences and inequality, and whether it should be such a high priority to take aggressive action on climate change. But then on the more denial side, you get 3 other categories: the disengaged, the doubtful, and the dismissive. And the basic answer is just don't even waste your time with the dismissive. Don't waste your time trying to convince hardcore climate deniers. It's not going to work. If you want to have fun with it and try, I can give you some tips about it. Focus on risk assessment, and risk assessment. Don't debate the science. It's a waste of your time. Focus on risk assessment. I can talk about that more at another time, but Michael Bloomberg and Hank Paulson. So Michael Bloomberg, business leader, mayor of New York City. Hank Paulson, the secretary, he was a Goldman Sachs exec, and what was he, Secretary of Treasury under Bush? And then I'm forgetting the third person, but they wrote a report called Risky Business that was a kind of an expert account of why it's so important from a business and GDP perspective to tackle climate change. And their whole report was all about risk assessment. Just think about how businesses assess their risk, then think about how Miami and New York City and New Orleans and Houston and all these other places have all these assets and they need to assess their risk. So that's the main advice about dealing with the dismissive, is don't waste your time, but if you do want to have fun with it, do a risk assessment, don't debate the science with them, telling them that 99% of the expert scientists agree with climate change. It's not going to work, no matter how right you are. And then there's 2 other categories where you have more ability to pierce into the disengaged and the doubtful. In any case, I only have a little bit of time, so I'll jump past that. 2016, the science, I know it's too small to read, but I just wanted to flag a couple of things. The percentage that I gave you, about 49% of Republicans accepting the basic science, this is right here. Global warming is caused mostly by human activities. Now it's down to 31%. This, of course, is the Fox News effect. This is the echo chamber of the deniers. It's really disillusioning to see what's happening with the Republican Party and the Republican voting base. But even so, 57% of Republican voters would support regulating CO2 as a pollutant. So on policy, you got 2/3 of Republican voters siding with you on the most aggressive policy. Things are just not quite as simple as they seem, which means there's a lot of room to pick people off and fight against what are called the merchants of doubt, the regime that has been pushing climate denial. This is a fascinating account of 6 Americans who changed their minds about global warming. A New York Times report just from February 21st of this year. Getting to, as I mentioned, the merchants of doubt, there's a small number, of course, of exceedingly wealthy fringe extremists who have been pushing climate denial, as well as just pushing the deregulation of so many other areas of policy, often seeking to dismantle government assistance in healthcare and a whole other series of progressive policies. For Merchants of Doubt, there's a new film that's focused on this book, but Orestes in one way. They were authors who wrote about the whole tobacco industry and all of its PR techniques and all of its techniques of denying cancer. Those same consulting firms that advised the tobacco industry about denying cancer relationships with cigarettes are the same people who are being hired to do the exact same PR strategy with ExxonMobil and other, and the Coke industries and other climate industries. The Mercers now, who were behind Breitbart, who were behind Trump, had Steve Bannon at the head of Breitbart, and now who are getting busted for the Cambridge Analytica Facebook, as one of you brought up Facebook earlier, scandal that's exploding. They're just right there from Long Island, hedge fund, math genius, and his daughter. They make the Koch brothers look like cozy teddy bears when you see how much more extreme these extremist billionaires are. But so the Koch brothers, the Mercers, it's a very small number of fringe extremists who are behind the denial. What some of it is about is just a worldview of anti-environmentalism, but what some of it is about is just an obsession with GDP growth and an obsession with opposing progressive government taking care of its people. So the person who was, until recently, the most powerful senator on environmental issues, Oklahoma Senator James Inhofe was the committee chair, the powerful chairman of the committee on environment and public works, or environment and natural resources. In any case, he was the head of the most important committee in the Senate. He was the one who brought a snowball when there was a snowy day in DC, and he brought it, to the Senate as proof that there's no global warming, there's global cooling. Well, he had made a stunning admission on Rachel Maddow's show that I used to believe in the climate science until I saw what effect climate policy would have on the GDP and on the industries that he cares about. And that's a lot of the story of the experts about public opinion, is that a lot of Americans actually are tempted to believe the climate science, but then they get fearful that climate policy is going to tank the economy, tank their industries, and so then they deal with that cognitive dissonance by denying the inconvenient truth. Ever heard of that phrase? Getting to the lawmakers. The biggest story that I had an uphill battle trying to persuade my students of for years and years, but now it's not so difficult to persuade anymore, is that the Republican Party is not in control of the Republican Party. The Republican Party has some wonderful, wonderful people in it. I wish the party well. I'm not a member of it, but I wish it a healthy future. I hope it comes back home to planet Earth, and I hope that it shows some sanity and responsibility and a little less treason. But the party has been taken over. It has been effectively taken over at the national level. Not entirely at the local level, not entirely at the county or state level. At the national level, the party has been taken over, and it's been a hostile takeover, to use corporate language. It's been taken over by not just one cabal, but sort of a loose association of various extremists with various differing or comparable beliefs. It used to be the Tea Party, now Trump jumped in front of the parade, and so it's sort of the right-wing pseudo-populists, but call it what you want. The Republican Party really is starting to not resemble in many ways what it once was. And it's purging its more moderate members, who are the ones who, on this topic, accept climate science and seek action. This was not predicted. You look at President Eisenhower's quote from 1954. At the time, he was considered a conservative Republican in some ways. Now he goes down as more liberal on many issues than Jimmy Carter or Bernie on some issues, not race, but on some other issues. But he said, should any political party attempt to abolish Social Security, unemployment insurance, and eliminate labor laws and farm programs, you would not hear of that party again in our political history. There is a tiny splinter group, of course, that believes that you can do these things. Among them are a few Texas oil millionaires and an occasional politician or businessman from other areas. Their number is negligible, and they are stupid. But when you look at the Mercers, the Koch brothers, and other affiliated extremist wealthy groups who the Republican Party's previous leadership despised these folks and tried their hardest to keep them from taking over the party, but for a variety of reasons, some of which Jen brought up earlier, campaign finance, insanity, and others, the takeover has occurred. This is the slide about, if you click this thing, it takes you to the 46 of the 54 senators who denied human influence in climate change. One of the most expert books by political scientists on this topic are two very respected, very centrist, very don't rock the boat, one professor and one kind of working for a think tank, Thomas Mann and Norman Ornstein. And the fact that of all people, that these two are the people raising the alarm of how extreme things are, it's just beyond jarring if you know political science, and Jen's nodding at me. But they're in an op-ed summarizing their book in the Washington Post, the title of their op-ed was, "Let's just admit it, Republicans are the problem." And these two are, trust me, American politics experts who you'd be the least likely to expect them from. Norman Ornstein works for a freaking conservative think tank, the American Enterprise Institute. It's shocking, that today very mainstream, don't rock the boat scholars who have great relationships with politicians on both sides of the aisle would be raising this alarm. But the truth is, the senators and the House members who they have great relationships with on the Republican side are completely with them, and we're some of their sources, because that's how extreme things are. On economic matters, clearly one of the big challenges for climate policy action is that the critics on the right argue that this will tank the economy. You put a carbon tax on everything, the people's gas prices are going to go up, it's going to be more expensive for them to drive, the auto industry is going to suffer, and you could just look at every other sector and hear that argument. What's so fascinating today is that the leaders of business and conservative to centrist leaders in government, again, Hank Paulson, Michael Bloomberg, and I could rattle off so many others, John McCain, they argue exactly the opposite, that climate action is essential for the health of our economy, and it's climate inaction and climate denial which is tanking and will tank our economy. But again, the twist that I said I would sprinkle in is that I do think that the folks on the right who are blocking climate policy are a teeny bit right on that front. And I think that some on the pro-climate change side are a bit too cheerleading that they can have their cake and eat it too. There are some sacrifices, and the sacrifices really need to be accounted for. Some of the public opinion on climate change indicates that it's such a downer topic. The pace at which the heat waves, droughts, extreme weather events from flooding, storm surges, sea level rise, and on and on and on. It's just so overwhelming that from a public relations, public opinion perspective, if you, as Al Gore, kind of give a gloom and doom account, you're going to lose people. So what do? You end your film on an uplifting note. You talk about how people should swap LED or CFL light bulbs and get an electric car. And on the one hand, it is super important. You guys are a group that knows about the importance of motivating people and getting them to turn out and be inspired. But the challenge is that it's so easy for the politicians or kind of public opinion shapers on the climate awareness, climate action side to kind of end on such a rosy note that it leaves a lot of Americans just thinking, oh, swap gas stations for electric car recharging stations. Oh, swap, swap nuclear power plants or swap, natural gas fired power plants with something more eco, and then keep living your lifestyle as it is. Just minor change, and then keep living your lifestyle, and the economy will grow. And I just can't responsibly articulate that that is the way things can go. Instead, I am very convinced, based on all the research and reading that I've done, that regardless of our policy agenda, whether we really tackle climate change or whether we continue to put our heads in the sand as a country, the fundamentals are not for the economy to just keep the GDP to just keep growing and growing and growing. We live as human beings, we're a species on a planet that's rooted in ecology, and there are ecological limits to growth, and I think a lot of what we're witnessing right now, and so much of the disruption around the world, is ecologically based. In the Middle East, food shortages, drought, and economic real damage because of it, leading to conflicts like Syria, leading to conflicts in Yemen and elsewhere. And in our country, we still are in this denial that thinking that we can just demand that our politicians keep raising the GDP 3% a year forevermore into perpetuity, even though all of the warning signs are there that we have too many people on the planet consuming too many things that are creating too much pollution, too much economic instability. And I'll get off my soapbox on that point, but you get the point. So one of the challenges is too little, too late. I didn't get to talk about what some of the policies are, but obviously some of them are ones that directly tackle how much we are emitting, so that in the future we can reduce how much carbon emissions are going up into the atmosphere. That's mitigation, and it includes things like cap and trade, it includes things like the Paris Climate Accords, it includes things like carbon taxes, renewable energy subsidies. Then there are, of course, reducing the number of people on the planet, which is still the elephant in the room that few politicians want to talk about, population control. And then there's stuff that's more like what Jen is doing, Citizens for Local Power, relocalizing the economy to build a more resilient future. On an adaptation, it's things like, do you go and build a storm wall to prevent a hurricane storm surge from coming up the Hudson River, or do you just build all kinds of green parks around the edge of the island of Manhattan to soak up naturally and the storms and move people out of harm's way? So that's about adaptation. Climate change is here. How are you going to adapt? Some call it defeatist. Some just call it necessary. Kurt Vonnegut quote, I'll end on two quotes. Kurt Vonnegut, dear future generations, please accept our apologies. We were rolling drunk about petroleum. Paul Simon, and God bless our standard of living. Let's keep it that way, and we'll all have a good time. You know what I have to say about that. Bottom line is that I would argue that fossil fuels are absolutely central to our economic standard of living, and the challenge is that we're depleting them, and for a variety of reasons, we are on board with a future that will involve much less fossil fuels, like it or not. Some people like Trump and his team are just trying to fight to grab as much as they can in the short run, but that is just a very short-term blip in the future of the 21st century. The future is going to involve less fossil fuels. That's the positive side, I would, but the part where I issue a little reality check and caution is what that means is that our economies are going to not keep growing 3% a year. They're going to steady off and maybe even go into recession and depression, and who wants to hear that? So I would never expect us candidates for office to say that, but I'm not a candidate for office, and I can give a little bit of a reality check. But some of the silver linings is that we can end up that way. We can really settle out to live much more healthy, local, vibrant, and lower, less consumptive, less polluting, and more healthy and less cancerous lifestyles if we can swallow that pill and acknowledge the reality that that is in our cards, and that is part of the reason I would argue again why there's so much rage and so much efforts to have a nostalgia to make America great again. There's a lot of racism in it, but some of it is just about economic insecurity and really not liking some of the messages of where the future of the country is going. I will end on that note.
Wow, thank you so much. This is fantastic. Thank you. I could spend an hour asking the question, but simple one. If nothing much changes in what we do as a country and what happens in the world, how long do you think it's going to take until we hit that Malthusian crisis point as a planet?
And by if nothing else changes, what do you mean?
As far as significant environmental policy, significant population policy, significant economic adaptations to reduction of resources and growth of population.
I think we're much closer to it than the vast majority of our leaders or experts who speak on this topic are willing to acknowledge. And so I think that this is a lot of why we're in the pickle that we're in, and why there's a sense of disruption all around the world right now. But yeah, that's something you and I can talk for another hour on that some other time.
Just a quick question. So like the GDP is used as, measuring the quality of life, and that's the standard. But we know that that was valid when there was a growing industrialization, right? And so now that marker is not good for us anymore. So are they looking into do other markers, because a lot is about how you're going to call the improvement, right? Like, are they looking at the, when they look at the numbers, and new units of measurement to quantify the quality of life, because the GDP does not correlate anymore in highly industrialized society. It could be fine for, rural areas in China that it's easy to do the GDP. But for us, to look at what we're doing, what is, the movement looking forward?
Yeah, so just to give one concrete example of what you're saying, and then I'll really give a very brief answer to the question. But if a hurricane floods New Orleans or Houston, Texas, and then it causes huge amounts of disruption, but then you have tens of thousands of people who need new homes, you need to rebuild the roads, all that's good for the GDP in the short run, right? I mean, people need to get another car because their car just got flooded. People need to go build another home. It's good for home builders. And so that's just one of bazillions of examples where people like JFK and others railed against the GDP as a measure, and they said this doesn't show us that we're improving, it just shows us that there's more economic transactions. And there are a whole movement of people, of scholars in economics. There's an institute called the Schumacher Institute in Massachusetts, and there's scores of others around the country that are working to emphasize other measures for the health of societies and economies.
I just want to say the United Nations has the World Happiness Report, and it's the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions. And so they rank countries, but they have a lot of markers in there. So the economy's in it, but it's housing, access to medical care, access to education. And we're not ranked all that high on it.
At the same time, though, they still buy into that development, GDP growth, development rhetoric of the economy still developing, and so many of the organizations that focus on poverty and inequality continue to buy into that rhetoric of development, which implies that GDP will keep growing.
Will you be speaking again somewhere else? Or is there fantastic information that we can...
I can give
Take
you...
your class.
You guys are the kindest audience. Glenn certainly has my information. I could give you my information.
We can bring her back.
Yeah.
Great, well,
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to close. So our friend Carlos is doing the video again. Everyone clap for Carlos. And we are going to start keeping a record, a video record of the minutes essentially on our website. So look for that, and I think link right next to that, we can actually have the slides for Dan's talk that we'll put up there. So we also have a very strong environmental group among us, including our friends Rebecca and Franco, and we're going to ask them now to come up and talk about some of the local initiatives they've been working on.
All right, so I don't want to waste too much time, so I am going to read a bit off my sheet because there's a lot to cover, and Franco could maybe talk a little bit about a certain campaign that we have going right now. So move forward, very exciting. We're in the process of adopting a highway as part of the New York Adopt a Highway program. So the proposed stretch of highway will be on Route 208 between Phillies Bridge Road to Jenkinstown Road. It's a 0.8 mile stretch. It's beautiful. It's got amazing view of the Gumps. So it'll be nice to do some cleaning up there. And as part of the program, Move Forward agrees to perform 2 to 4 cleanups per year for a 2-year period. So it's a 2-year commitment. We have submitted the application and had a discussion with the state coordinator for the program, and we're looking forward to approval within the next week. So that's exciting. Once we have obtained our highway work permit from the state, we'll be ready to hit the road. Another exciting announcement, and some of you might know already, is that Gardner has recently become a climate smart community. This is through the state, and it's the state supporting local climate action, supporting us to do the right thing. So some of the things that falls under this is reducing greenhouse emissions, improving community health, and safety, and supporting a green economy. There's more, but that's, some of the big points. Some of the projects that we already have going, and we haven't been going that long, but we're already out running, is the Repair Cafe, changing street lights over to LED lights, which Amy is in charge of and taking the lead on that. Creating a youth task force to empower and educate kids about climate change, and running a community solarized campaign. And at this point, Franco spent a lot of time writing the grant that got approved for the community solar campaign. So I'll just talk very briefly about that.
Okay, so community solar, just to kind of give you a little bit of background on what that is. I mean, everyone is probably pretty familiar with the rooftop solar. You get somebody to come install it. There are plenty of incentives from state and federal to get tax breaks and that sort of thing. This is a little bit different. This is a community solar program in which we have set up, we will contract with a solar installer that has a solar farm, a whole array of solar panels out in the field somewhere, linked back into the electrical grid. And what happens is that you subscribe to that solar farm and obtain a discount on your electrical bill. So you have the peace of mind that A, your energy is coming from solar, and B, you get a little bit of a discount on your electrical bill. It's a great way for folks that either don't have the funds to move forward with anything on the roof, don't have roof access, it's not facing the right way, not shaped well, too many trees, that sort of thing. Our house is like that. It's too steep of a roof, trees all around us, we'd have to cut those down. So this is a great incentive. Also for renters.
Schools, businesses,
Absolutely.
low-income residents, it's all inclusive. So that's why it's different from doing rooftop.
So what have we done so far? Rebecca mentioned we applied for the grant. There's a lot of information that they ask for. There's a lot of vetting that goes into this. Work with Jason and Climate Smart Gardner, the town board, the ECC, and Gardner. So all these groups really put in a lot of work to make it a successful campaign thus far. So as Rebecca mentioned, we were approved as one of the few latest edition of communities that were granted this solarized grant. It's a $5,000 grant. It's used for community outreach, marketing, education, all those kinds of things. What's coming up in the next couple months is we are putting out our RFPs, the requests for proposal that go to the solar companies to see what they come back with. And then we have a selection committee within our solarized team that will evaluate along with NYSERDA, which is the New York, I never remember the acronym, New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, or one of those. So they work hand in hand with us, help us select the appropriate installer based on multiple variables, cost, subscriber costs, availability to the area, and that sort of thing. Once that is in place and we've selected someone, we will be also setting an official launch date, and we'll have many different campaign stops along the way. So we're planning on attending events and festivals and all that stuff throughout the late spring, summer, and into fall. We're hoping to wrap up hopefully before Thanksgiving. Once the holidays hit, obviously it gets a little dicey around here. So that's kind of where we're at.
And the website will go up, so there'll be a place where you can go and sign up and get more information. And we'll get that all, the next general meeting, we'll get that all out to you. This is very new. Cuomo hasn't even announced it.
Yeah.
So we're just kind of sitting tight for a minute. Yeah.
So that's it. So I hope to get some signatures soon.
Is this going on the former landfill?
Well, the thing is, we haven't picked a company to go with yet. There are at least two that I know of in Gardner that are potential sites.
Mm-hmm.
They're not there yet. They're not even gone through the permitting process yet. By the time they go through the town board and all that permitting, the planning board has to be involved as well. they're probably not going to be up and running in time for when we're done with this campaign. However, that said, you don't necessarily need to be done on time. There just has to be a timeline as to when they'll be online with their solar panels. So let's just say, we're planning on wrapping up by November 1st, and they're saying January 1st, the panels will be online. We can still move forward with that and contract with that individual. It just means that as subscribers, you all will not be getting that solar discount until they're up and running and pipe back into the grid. So it's a little bit of a touch and go. There are plenty of other solar farms in the Hudson Valley that are already established and ready to
There's
go.
one right on, you know the one on by Hannaford. Right?
Yeah, that's not the solar farm, but that's the company,
Right,
New York
that's
Solar. So they're one of the companies out there. They are looking at potential permit in Gardner. There's another one as well that's looking, that already has some paperwork in, but is not there yet. So can't say with whether, I would love for it to be right here in Gardner. Supporting local business is really another offshoot of this campaign. But ultimately, it will be in the Hudson Valley no matter what, because it has to be able to pipe back into the Central Hudson electrical grid. So it's not like we're gonna pick something out in Maine or out in the prairies in the middle of the country or anything.
How far can it go to fight back energy, let's say?
It just has to be able to go back into the grid, so it has to be within the structure of wherever the grid borders are for Central Hudson.
It's on, the former land that was owned by the town of Gardner.
Yeah,
That's the point.
yeah, there's, absolutely.
It's not being used right now. I noticed in Kingston, up at the mall, they're putting up a solar array on the former landfill.
Yeah, there's ultimately some caveats that go along with some of this. One is in the town of Gardner, they already have a resolution in place that says that the maximum size of a solar farm in Gardner could be no more than 1.9 megawatts. That's okay, but as some folks may have seen, there was an initial announcement that went out from Como about 2-3 weeks ago, something like that, where he announced a 5.5 megawatt farm happening in Gardner, which no one in Gardner, planning board or otherwise even knew about. And it's outside of our limits, so we'd have to pass a new town resolution in order to do. So there's a lot of that stuff that goes on.
It's coming down the
But,
line,
yeah. And there's nothing to say that if we pick a solar farm, I'll just make it up and say it's across the river or something, or somewhere else in the Hudson Valley, and then we have someone come online here, that we can't work with those individuals. Our job is not necessarily to make money for any one company, it's to ensure that we're signing people up on community solar. So while we're contracted with that individual, if some point down the line, after our campaign's over, another company comes online, there's nothing to say that we can't move ahead and switch to them as well. We'll have to, once we select the contractor, we have to go with them for the life of the campaign. But like I said, it's short. We're talking this 5 to 6 month campaign tops. So we'll be done by early November, I'm sure.
I just want to tell you about a couple events. I'll be very quick. There's 2 environmental events coming up. Of course, it's the month of Earth Day, and people get very excited to celebrate the Earth in April. So the annual Earth Day Fair in New Paltz at the Reformed Church of Huguenot on Huguenot Street is this Saturday, April 21st. It's from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. This is a free, fun-filled, educational Earth celebration. It's very kid-friendly, very family-friendly, very lighthearted, just to kind of celebrate our Earth and, educate people on a few things. Climate Smart Gardner will have a table at this event, so please come on and stop by, and I know Marlene and Joel will be there. Yeah. So also the annual River Keeper Sweep is on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. We'll be cleaning up garbage all along the Wallkill River. New Paltz does have a project, but we'll be participating, Climate Smart Gardner will be participating in the Gardner one. And if you are interested in that, you have to go on the River Keeper website and register with them. And we're going to be meeting at the Farmers Turnpike Fishing Access Road And in addition to land volunteers, we also desperately need kayakers, canoes, strong paddlers to be able to get some of the garbage from the sides, from the water side. So, you know, we can get a lot on land, but we can't get everything. So we really need, so if you're interested, please sign up for that, and that's on May 5th. And if there's anything else you want, any more information about, you can see us afterwards. And I'm sorry, you have so much time.
Thank you. It's funny, I feel like I'm not supposed to work on weekends, but I'm in the solar industry. So I feel like I'm amongst friends here. Just as an aside on that, I think you guys will like hearing this. I've been in the solar industry for like 6 years. I worked down southeast for a bunch of years, and I came back to New York. New York is the best state for solar. I was super proud to be a New Yorker when I was working down south. Second, maybe only to California, but it's really important that we keep those initiatives going, and it's a homegrown thing here in New York, so I had to throw that out there. So, my name's Dan Deegan. I'm from Pleasant Valley, New York. I'm a mom. That's the first time those words have ever come together. I joined this group recently. I do have to say, though, thank you to Move Forward New York. Thank you to all of you who've been involved in this and been activists. I'm the typical example of, I'm 39, I'm married, I have 3 little kids, and somebody who's never done anything, ever. Sit around, angry, lament, do nothing. Busy with work, busy with life, busy with soccer practices and all that thing, and using that as an excuse, like that's what my thing is, and just letting all you people carry the torch and fight. Besides having this idiot get elected, I call him a pig, but that would insult pigs. But that happened, and then the multitude of shootings. I was in college during Columbine. That comes and goes. And shame on me for, I don't know how many shootings it took to wake me up, but apparently it took until Parkland. I mean, shame on me. Why did it take that many? Why did it take that many? And let alone, besides the school shootings, how about all the shootings that have happened in communities of color for years and years and years and years and years? Just because what I look like, I wasn't out protesting? So Parkland happened, and the reason I'm so thankful to Move Forward is if you ever have something where you are explosive and you need a home to find, I found Move Forward. They were there, and I got involved in this. I've only been an activist for, when did you do New Paltz? When was that?
March 14th.
Yeah, I mean, a month. They had that event there. The only downside, I should have known by the shirt, we got to work on the shirt sizes. So I didn't realize that. What am I here for? So, Moms Demand Action. What is it? It's a grassroots movement. It's 3 million folks strong. It's in 50 states. I can just say all states. All states has a representation. Where did it come from? It started after Sandy Hook by a mother of 5 who probably was just as enraged as all of us, but she had it. It started with a Facebook page, and then from there it just went, as you can imagine. They partnered up with a group called Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and that's when it really started getting some momentum. And then on top of that, they found there's another group called Every Town for Gun Safety. That's really I guess you could say, the money behind the organization. And what we are is we're the grassroots. We're the boots on the ground. Protests, movements, trying to get volunteers, trying to get people involved. They had a big focus on the walk over the bridge a couple weeks ago. But to give you an idea of what they're doing and what I really like about moms, they're not just out there having their voices heard, they're playing to win. They're not looking just to kind of take part. I would say they actually want to take over. And I like that. And the sense of that is, to give you an idea of what they're doing. So an example that we went on, we had we did the lobby day in Albany a couple months ago?
Yeah,
Couple weeks ago?
I remember this one
Yeah.
last year.
Okay. And really what the point was, it was there to be, make our lawmakers feel the weight and feel the importance of this, but they were there with a mission. So they were there for 2 specific things. So we went there to raise awareness of the 2 bills that they had, and one was for IRPA, Extreme Risk Protection Order, and then the other was to fund research. I don't know if anybody knows this or not, but the CDC, they're not allowed to, it's insanity. I think this has actually changed. If anybody knows this, correct me, but the CDC is not allowed to investigate gun violence. What?
Yeah.
So, but nobody's doing it. So right now, nobody knows why people go into schools and shoot people, and nobody's putting any money into that. There's probably a lot of money into tick research. right? Other things, but nobody's putting any time or money into this. So when we went to Albany, it was focused on two main topics, ERPO and the research. I'll go off, I guess, script and just give my own opinion because I want to make sure I'm not speaking for moms. What I felt like, and that was my question to Jen, right? Jen? Yes. So we were there to thank the assemblymen and women that had voted for what we wanted, and we were there to basically thank the Republicans for nothing. So there's a very clear message here. When Moms Demands Action wants to get involved in something, they have a point. They have stuff they want to get pushed through. They have things that they want to get done. If the people don't want to do that, the next message that comes down from the top from every town for gun safety is vote them out. And it was very clear when we were there, there's this point, there's a wall. They're not going to do what we need. They're going to celebrate, and they're going to harden targets, and they're going to talk about mental health. Fine, but what about all these other elements? They need to go. FASO needs to go. Sereno needs to go.
Yes.
So it's, I don't know if I'm allowed to be like this here, so maybe I'm breaking the rule. But that's the point of this. It's to make it very clear and raise awareness to the issue and have very clear, specific asks. And if you won't follow through, then we will absolutely get people in there who will, because it's up to our kids. I guess I'll give a real quick story on why I'm here. I have 3 children, ages 4, 6, and 9. I'm sure everybody has kids here. It became alarming that every time I would go to a school, I had images. The school was no longer what I thought of. Like, you see the pretty pictures. Now you're associating that with, that could be a kid that gets killed. Or where do they run out? Or where are they supposed to hide? This is what we all think when we go through schools. This is the insanity that we live in. I put them on the bus in the morning, and every morning, I mean, you see, it's like, all right, is this the last time I'm going to see that bus go up the street? We shouldn't have to live like this. It's absurd. So I just had it, and I needed to get involved in something. And Moms is a like I said, it's 3 million strong. It's nationwide, and I think Shannon Watts, the founder of Moms, said there's 2 parts. I mean, look at nature. Nothing is scarier than a pissed off mom in the animal kingdom, in the animal world, right? You don't want to get between the mom and her cub. That's the same thing here. But they talk about, you know, the NRA lobby and the strength they have. Okay, they're going to see real quick the strength that this group has, because they're not losing momentum. As far as to talk about how you can get involved, we have a sign-up sheet. That's the first thing, so I'm relatively new, so I'm not really sure how I can tell you how we can corroborate more than just join up and show up and be there when we're there. That's huge. As far as coming up some events we have, so on April 23rd, Moms Demand Action is going to be with Hudson Valley Strong in Rhinebeck at 5:30 p.m. There's a couple candidates there, candidate Ryan and candidate Flynn. They're going to be at the Church of the Messiah in Rhinebeck, so that's April 23rd at 5:30. FASO Fridays is another big one. If anybody goes to that, I think Moms Demand Action is a fixture there for good reason. We know how FASO votes for the NRA. So 11:30 to 1 p.m., they're there wearing red, they're wearing orange. You hear about this Wear Orange movement, in case anybody doesn't know what that is. There's a walk over the Brooklyn Bridge on June 2nd. It's an all-day event. You're supposed to wear orange. Wear Orange signifies a movement that came from a young lady who had lost a friend to gun violence, and with hunters, they wear orange to, alarm, blah, 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 and keep themselves safe. That's the whole point of it. So you wear orange to support the movement. But those are the 3 big dates. April 23rd in Rhinebeck, May 18th with our buddy Faso, and June 2nd on the Brooklyn Bridge.
Quick question, are you guys supporting the April 20th Day of Action that Parkland students are asking
Yeah.
high school students to do?
Yeah, frankly, if you sign up, I'll get information on that. That was on the other dates to remember sheet we had, and they took it off of this, so I don't know if something changed, but as of
Okay.
last week, we were. Yeah.
Okay.
Any
other
questions?
questions?
Thank you.
So there's a group that morning, they're meeting at the Palace Diner at 8 a.m. and they're going to take a train.
So I'm happy to report, we actually had a little bit of a fundraiser on Friday night related to the Move Forward New York Gun Violence Prevention Task Force that I know Amy's been integral to, as have several other people here. And so my band that I'm in, Questionable Authority, SUNY New Paltz, is only all faculty punk rock band, along with a group called Charge the Mound, which has Raj Panya, who's in our physics department, and Bagad New York, that has Alex Bartholomew, crazy bagpipe band. We had a fundraiser with every single dollar from the door came to the back to the task force, and we made $707 the other night.
Just real quick, we invested in a kit from New York 19 Votes. And what this is targeting all of our young voters. We have 280 postcards. And what we're going to ask you to do is, I'm going to pass this one around so people can just see why we're bringing it up now. We're going to ask you to actually fill out postcards. In the kit, comes with stamps, comes with mailing labels, so we know all of these lovely young people. And we're just going to suggest, thank you very much for registering. Please don't forget to go out and vote on June 26th. It's simple, it's straightforward, but this postcard in particular, as you're looking at it, very much targets March for Our Lives, moms, and everything else that's going on that's really important to the young people to get out. So just keep up on the Facebook page, because once we get a date, we're going to pull everyone together and do pizza. I don't know, we'll figure something out.
Efficient. So a couple things I have. So we put together a group working with the young people, Move Forward New York, the Next Generation, and Jacob Saroff, who's here from that group. He's been working with some of the other kids in the New Paltz High School regarding some kind of initiatives. And Jacob, if you wouldn't mind just taking a minute and talking about, so they actually met with the principal of New Paltz High School and with some teachers about a project, and it looks like we have something coming together.
Yes, we were trying to think about the best way to get people to vote, and we also want to educate them on the candidates themselves so they know who they're voting for. So one thing we talked about was on May 6th at SUNY New Paltz, there's a Congressional, District 19 Democratic Congressional Candidates Forum that will be happening. It's sponsored by this group called Resisterhood, focused on women's issues. And so a bunch of us are going to be there taking detailed notes on what the candidates are saying in order to disseminate the information to people who will be voting this year so they can know who they're voting for. So that's the main initiative.
Organizers of that event, the primary organizers, it looks like Move Forward New York Next Generation probably will be an official co-sponsor of that particular event. So we're really trying to get our young people to that event. Another event that group is going to be part of the first Friday after school's out, which is June 29th. That group is going to own Fossil Friday. So that is the agenda for Fossil Friday. It's Move Forward New York Next Generation. It's going to be the kids of the Hudson Valley come tell John Fossil that what he's doing is not okay and that we are going to vote him out. So we're really looking forward to that. If you have kids, they can make signs, they can show up, and Jason then pointed out that we might buy them ice cream, but we'll see. Okay, so I asked Sajid to come and briefly just kind of give some updates about Spotlight 19. Now, Spotlight 19 is, it's pretty much Sajid and her husband, Justin, Tracy, and they were not able to be here today because it is their baby shower, and Sajid's pregnant, and we're all wishing her the best. They have put together this podcast with a website and a whole bunch of social media concurrent with that. That's all about examining the candidates, examining Fossil's record, looking really, really carefully, ultimately with the goal of getting this district on a better path. So they really have, I think, the most detailed resources for our purposes on this particular issue. So Sajid said that they couldn't be here today, but she was really kind enough to actually make a PowerPoint presentation. It's only about 4 or 5 slides, just to give a sense of what their resources are and how we can all use those. So Spotlight 19, they have a Twitter handle, they're on Instagram, they're on Facebook. They put together something called a Tiny Town Hall series with each of the 7 Democratic candidates, and our friends Joel and Marlene attended one of those, all of those. So thank you, Joel and Marlene. I think you guys actually get a shout out on one of these upcoming slides. So let me take a quick look. So they tracked John Fossil's votes. They had this Tiny Town Hall series. Am I right? Joel, and see that you got your names up on the slides here. So yeah, so you guys are definitely a great force for that. And these were just like little town halls in their homes. They did a podcast. Each one of these is found on their website. They also have really put together the guts of a great candidates guide. In my research, this is by far and away the elite resource for comparing the different candidates. They put so much time into this, and so I really encourage people to take a look at this. And if you take a look at their website, Just briefly, I'll sort of breeze through it. This is what they've got for now, and they're working on a formal guide, which is going to be an elaboration on this. But this webpage has the personal history of every candidate. It has a link to the podcast for each of them. It has links to their websites. It has information about their job history, their connection with the District of 19, platform at a glance, so you can see who says, single payer healthcare no matter what, who says something that's more, not that exactly, and so forth. So this is a really, really great resource that they have put together. And like I said, if you go to the episodes button, yeah, you can listen to the podcast for every single one of them as well. And there's all the information on how to find them. They probably have, it's not just candidate interviews. They have about 30-something podcasts, I think, and they're with lots of really interesting people related to governance in our area. So definitely check that out. And to Saja and Justin, Move Forward New York says thank you and best of luck from Move Forward New York. And one final thing for me, and then Deborah's got an ultimate final thing. I've had a couple people ask me, people seem a little bit confused as to how to buy the great t-shirts. So you can see we have some great Move Forward bling in the room. We've got a coffee cup, we've got t-shirts, I have a tank top, there is a hoodie. I think Jason might have 2 hoodies if I recall.
T-shirt?
So, all you gotta do is moveforwardnewyork.org. This is our website. So check out moveforwardnewyork.org, and we just have this little button here called Shop. And if you go to that, it brings you to our Redbubble. So we actually contract this stuff out with Redbubble, which is a really great resource for this kind of stuff. And you can buy t-shirts, and you can buy all kinds of stuff, and you can get the mug, and there's an opportunity to get bumper stickers.
Jason wants to really focus on bumper stickers. He wants a bumper sticker.
Oh, do you? Yeah, no, I thought, you know what, you're always stuck in traffic at that light, right? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
People see the bumper stickers, and you're amongst other people who have the same kind of belief system, right? We got to promote the good.
So, and just, I think everybody in here knows, but are any money, any contributions, if you get a t-shirt or anything, it allows us to get the postcards and things like this, and to keep our website up, and to give out to, good causes. So that's really where the money is going, right back out to trying to promote all of these issues. So, but, we want to support, sure, at the same time, for some of the events, so.
Yeah, so that's about it.
It's a little
So
commercial.
check that out, and we hope to see even more Move Forward shirts. Next time, I'm going to give it back to Deborah. Real quick, I will. Yeah, real quick, there's something you might all be aware of. There's a new organization at SUNY New Paltz among faculty. It's kind of a guerrilla union initiative, to be honest. SUNY faculty across the entire state system have been out of contract for 5 years, and not everyone knows that, and so, of course, we're not happy about that. We consider it problematic. These same 5 years have been actually pretty strong economically for the state, and as someone pointed out, that same pattern of New York State putting their funding, lowering their funding dramatically and relying on, in this case, tuition dollars, it's been a huge thing. So less than 30% of the operating budget for SUNY comes from New York State University of New York. Think about that. This is a problem that used to not be that way. So Radical University Professionals is an organization that a bunch of us are involved in right now. I just wrote a letter to the New Paltz Times that you might have read the other day, kind of speaking about who we are, and we're essentially trying to push Cuomo to try to actually support the public higher education, which from the perspective of a lot of us, he has not done. So if you're interested in more information about that, there's a web page, there's Facebook, and we certainly appreciate support for people that are interested in public higher education. So just quick up.
Thank you. And the one final thing that I just want to wrap up with is that we have our good friends Marlene and Joel here with us today, and they don't know this is coming, but Marlene and Joel are always at events. They're at Puzzle Fridays, they're at the Spotlight, Tiny Towns, they're at everything. And on Friday, we weren't sure if they were going to be able to be here.
So I'm going to ask Rebecca if you can just share a quick update on the initiative that we would like to do for them. They have obviously had some challenges, and on Friday Joel had a mini stroke and was in the hospital, but he is here with us, which is a huge thing. And such a dedicated person, but we just want to support them because they also unfortunately are going to have to move from their home to another location. So Rebecca, you want to just talk for a second? Yeah, there's nobody kinder. Like if you need anything, you go to them, and they give and they give and they give. And now they need us. So, of course, they would never ask, but we want to do a Fund Me site for them. We're going to wait. We're not going to do it right away. We'll probably do it once Marlene gives me the okay. And just look for that because we really want to. They're one of the most incredible couples that I know, and I really, they need us right now. They will not ask. So just to let you know. So we just wanted to thank them for all their dedication to us, and we are going to help you. So I think that concludes our meeting. Not too bad with the time, despite we started a few minutes late and we had a very packed agenda. We will do some of the actions. We'll set a date and we can come together. And if you can join us, we will meet and write out these cards and continue to get out there and to do our part in making a difference. So our next meeting is going to be May 20th. And right now, one of our agenda parts is Erin Collier will be joining us. She is the 7th candidate to join the Democratic candidates. We will wait to see. She is the one who we're not 100% sure what her final numbers are. So as long as she is actually a candidate, we will have her. We'll also put together some of the other agenda items. So we'll meet on the 20th. And then we're going to come back here in June after the June 26th primary and decide how we're going to really make a difference in helping the candidates. And then we'll try to find a fun time. We've talked about having a fundraiser. Jason wants to give out bumper stickers at all of these events. So you can put them on your cars, your friend's cars, Passo's car.
What about a shopping bag? We could use those fabric shopping bags.
Yes, that would be a great idea. I think they're on there. So yeah, so shopping bags, coffee mugs, anything. So we want to do something fun in the summer, and then we'll probably regroup again in September. We have the September 13th primary, and then of course the most important, the November 6th election day, as far as really getting a good turnout. But obviously all of the actions that we're taking, all of our amazing speakers who come and join us and inform us and make us know more and more about these issues to motivate us to do things. I just thank all of them, and I thank all of you for showing up and for doing your part. So have a wonderful Sunday evening.
One final piece of action. You got a final piece of action?
I do. There's not an action. I just want you to know that I did text Juan, and he says thank you. He's very excited to have move forward support.
And one, I'm going to put this as obligatory. I think that in honor of our friends, Joel and Marlene, we're going to take a move forward picture on the front steps with them right now. So please join us for that.
Thank you. Thank you.